Thursday, July 31st, 2025. AGNDD intelliReport topic. 2025 Kamchatka Peninsula Earthquake. Please pardon any visual and informational inaccuracies in this entirely AI-generated Wikipedia-sourced video article. On the 30th of July, 2025, at 11:24:52 PTT, 29th of July, 2025, 23:24:52 UTC, a magnitude 8.8 megathrust earthquake struck off the eastern coast of the Kamchatka Peninsula in the Russian Far East, 119 kilometers, 74 miles, east-southeast of the coastal city of Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. It was the most powerful earthquake recorded worldwide since the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and is tied with the 1906 Ecuador-Colombia and 2010 Chile earthquakes as the sixth strongest earthquake ever recorded by seismometers. The earthquake caused moderate damage and multiple injuries in Kamchatka Krai and Sakhalin Oblast, but the subsequent Pacific-wide tsunami was relatively weaker than expected, with waves approximately 1 m, 3 feet or less in most places. Tectonic setting. The earthquake occurred on the Kuril-Kamchatka subduction zone, a large thrust fault and convergent plate boundary between the North American plate and Pacific plate that extends from the east coast of the Kuril Islands to the Kamchatka Peninsula. Active subduction of the Pacific plate beneath the North American plate has been continuous since the Cretaceous. Estimates of the rate of convergence between these two plates varies between 76 and 90 millimeters, 3.0 and 3.5 inches, annually. Large earthquakes on the subduction zone have been recorded before. The previous largest earthquake was the 1952 Severo-Kurilsk earthquake, which measured MW 8.89.0 and had an epicenter 45 kilometers, 28 miles, southeast of the 2025 earthquake. This event caused a large and destructive tsunami along the Kamchatka coast. It is believed to have ruptured a 700 kilometers, 430 miles, by 150 to 200 kilometers, 93 to 124 miles, section of the subduction zone from Shipunsky Cape in the north to Onkotan in the south. Unlike most large subduction earthquakes, the greatest fault movement in the 1952 event occurred at deeper depth instead of being closer to the trench. Movement on the fault was inferred to be as deep as 40 kilometers, 25 miles, and possibly 60 to 80 kilometers, 37 to 50 miles. Little slip occurred at the trench, leaving it locked and accumulating unreleased elastic energy. A larger earthquake occurred in 1737 and had a magnitude estimated at 9.3. This earthquake generated a tsunami 63 m, 207 feet, high according to written records by travelers and tsunami deposit observations. In 1841, another earthquake with an estimated magnitude of 9.0 produced a major tsunami that was also recorded in Hawaii. The large submarine earthquake occurred on the 29th of July at 23 hours 24 minutes and 50 seconds Coordinated Universal Time with a moment magnitude MWW of 8.8, according to the United States Geological Survey, USGS. Its epicenter was off the Pacific coast of the Kamchatka Peninsula, about 136 kilometers, 85 miles, east-southeast of Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, while the hypocenter was put at a shallow depth of 35 kilometers, 22 miles. The National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology and Geoscience Australia both put the magnitude at MW 8.6. A foreshock, measuring MW 7.4, struck on the 20th of July, about 60 kilometers, 37 miles, to the southwest of the 29th of July main shock. More than 90 aftershocks followed, including an MW 6.9 event at 0:09 UTC on the 30th of July. The USGS said the earthquake occurred as a result of shallow reverse faulting on the subduction zone interface. They estimated the area where movement occurred on the interface to be 390 kilometers, 240 miles, by 140 kilometers, 87 miles. The rupture was believed to have occurred in a seismic gap between the ruptures of the 1923 Kamchatka and 1952 Severo-Kurilsk events. A finite fault model released by the USGS indicated slip on an approximately 600 kilometers, 370 miles, by 200 kilometers, 120 miles, section of the subduction zone. Most of the rupture extended 500 kilometers, 310 miles, southwest along the subduction zone from the epicenter to the Kuril Islands. Most of the slip occurred close to the trench and southwest of the epicenter in an elliptical patch with slip of 710 m, 2333 feet, and peaking at 10.533 m, 34.56 feet. The Geoscope Observatory estimated that the earthquake ruptured the subduction zone for a duration of more than 180 seconds. The USGS estimated the earthquake's duration to be about 230 seconds. In Japan, the earthquake was felt at an intensity of 2 on the Shindo scale in Hokkaido. Tsunami. Warnings. Asia. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, PTWC, warned of hazardous tsunami waves along the coasts of Russia and Japan. Authorities in Russia also issued tsunami warnings for the Kamchatka Peninsula and the Kuril Islands, which were canceled on the evening of the 30th of July. In the first tsunami alerts issued in Japan since the 2024 Hualien earthquake, the Japan Meteorological Agency, JMA, issued a tsunami warning for the coasts of Hokkaido down to Wakayama Prefecture in Honshu. Tsunami advisories were issued for Shikoku down to the Okinawa Islands and elsewhere. 900,000 people in 133 municipalities were also advised to evacuate. The agency said up to 3 m, 10 feet waves were expected to reach the coast and urged the evacuation of the areas expected to be impacted. The runways of Sendai Airport were closed, while JR East, JR Central, and JR Hokkaido suspended rail services. End notes. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, a large earthquake can trigger an eruption of a nearby volcano, but only if they are already poised to erupt. Workers at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant were ordered to evacuate, while a scheduled release of treated radioactive water from the facility into the Pacific Ocean was halted. The Japanese Defense Ministry deployed its air assets to the Pacific coast to gather information. Around 2 million people across the country were advised to evacuate. The JMA downgraded its warnings to advisories on the night of the 30th of July and lifted them altogether the next day. Indonesia's Meteorology, Climatology, and Geophysical Agency issued a warning for parts of Papua, North Maluku, North Sulawesi, and Gorontalo. Authorities in Indonesia expected small tsunami waves of less than 50 centimeters height in coastal areas of the regions mentioned, advising residents to move away from beaches and low-lying shores. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology issued a tsunami advisory for the Pacific coast of the Philippines with waves expected to be up to 1 m, 3 feet. The advisory covered 22 provinces from Batanes to Davao Occidental. The advisory was eventually canceled as the seismological agency did not record significant sea level disturbances and destructive tsunami waves. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center also warned of waves measuring less than 30 centimeters, 12 in, hitting South Korea. The Americas. The PTWC, Emergency Info BC, and other agencies issued an advisory for British Columbia and the Pacific coastline, along with potentially strong currents and surges, with waves under 30 centimeters, 12 in. Tsunami warnings were issued for parts of Alaska and Hawaii. The entirety of the U.S. West Coast, California, Oregon, and Washington states, was placed under alert, as were portions of Alaska's Aleutian Islands, and immediate evacuations were ordered for coastal areas across Hawaii. The U.S. Coast Guard captain of the port ordered all vessels to leave port throughout the islands. The first waves were expected to reach Hawaii 19 o'clock HST UTC 10. The California Central Coast and San Francisco Bay Area coast were placed under advisory by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. A warning was also issued from Cape Mendocino, California, to the border with Oregon. The Mexican Navy warned of strong currents at ports along the Pacific coast from Baja California to Chiapas. The government also urged residents to stay away from beaches. Alerts were also issued in Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Peru, and the Galapagos Islands in Ecuador, Oceania, and the Pacific Islands. The PTWC warned that tsunami waves 1 to 3 meters, 3.3 to 9.8 feet high, were possible in Hawaii and the Solomon Islands. The center also warned that waves up to 30 centimeters, 0.98 feet, could reach American Samoa, Chuuk, Kiribati, Nauru, New Caledonia, Niue, Papua New Guinea, Pitcairn Islands, Tokelau, Tuvalu, Vanuatu, and Wallis and Futuna. The governor of Hawaii, Josh Green, said data from Midway Atoll measured waves from peak to trough of 1.8 m, 6 feet, and noted that a wave of that size could dislodge trees and move cars. The size of the waves which would hit the state remained uncertain. Hawaii downgraded the warnings to an advisory. An advisory was issued by the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, for strong currents and unpredictable surges around the entire coast of New Zealand. The next day, NEMA extended the advisory for another 24 hours due to rebounding tsunami activity from South America. An alert was issued by Tonga's meteorological services, advising people in tsunami threat areas to evacuate. In Fiji, the Mineral Resources Department similarly issued a tsunami watch for low-lying coastal areas. The Cook Islands Meteorological Services issued an advisory, saying there was no immediate threat to the islands, but the situation was being monitored. Samoa's Meteorological Office issued an advisory, cautioning the public around coastal areas, while the PTWC said a threat to American Samoa was still under investigation. In the Marquesas Islands, French Polynesia, authorities warned that waves of up to 1.12.2 m, 3.67.2 feet, could reach the islands of Uahuka, Nuku Hiva, and Hiva Oa. Guam and Australia were also put under an advisory, and alerts were also issued in Palau and the Northern Mariana Islands. Impact. In Russia, tsunami waves of 5 to 6 meters, 16 to 20 feet, were observed in parts of Kamchatka and neighboring islands. Waves measuring 3 to 4 meters, 10 to 13 feet, were observed in Yelizovsky district in Kamchatka, with a 5-meter, 16-foot wave striking Severo-Kurilsk in the nearby Kuril Islands. The Shirshov Institute of Oceanology said waves of 10 to 15 meters, 33 to 49 feet, may have struck parts of the peninsula's coast. According to University of Oregon scholar Diego Melgar, it is possible that tsunami waves of up to 43 meters, 141 feet, struck lesser populated areas of Kamchatka. In Nikolskoye, Kamchatka Krai, Russia, the waves were 6.1 centimeters, 0.2 feet high. In Japan, tsunamis were observed in 22 of the country's 47 prefectures. A 1.3 m, 4.3 feet wave hit Kuji Iwate. Tsunamis measuring 80 centimeters, 2.6 feet, were reported to have struck Hachijojima and Namuro, Hokkaido, while 50 centimeters, 1.6 feet waves were observed at Ishinomaki Port in Miyagi Prefecture. Waves of up to 40 centimeters, 16 in, were reported in Owarai, Ibaraki, while waves measuring 30 centimeters, 12 in, were reported at the port of Yokohama, at Kushiro in Hokkaido, and Ofunato and Kamaishi, Iwate. Wave heights reached up to 60 centimeters, 2.0 feet, in areas such as Hamanaka, Hokkaido. A 20 centimeters, 0.66 feet wave was observed in Harumi, Tokyo. On the 31st of July, waves reaching up to 70 centimeters, 28 in, were recorded in Owarai and Tokachi Subprefecture, Hokkaido. In French Polynesia, the remote Marquesas Islands reported wave heights of 1.5 meters, 4.9 feet, with 30 centimeters, 0.98 feet, high waves reported elsewhere. A 1 meter, 3.3 feet tsunami was observed in the Galapagos Islands. In the Hawaiian Islands, a 1 meter, 3 feet tsunami struck Midway Atoll at 17 o'clock. SST Kahului, Hawaii was struck by a 1.74 meter, 5.7 feet wave, while at Hilo, the tsunami was 1.49 meters, 4.9 feet high. The town of Haleiwa was struck by a 1.21 meter, 4.0 feet surge at 1948 HST. The town's gauge recorded an amplitude of 1.2 meters, 4 feet, relative to normal sea level in the tsunami's first impact in the area. In North America, water levels measuring 0.43 meters, 1.4 feet, above tide levels were observed in the Aleutian Islands. Waves over 60 centimeters, 2.0 feet, were observed in various locations in California, with maximum confirmed heights of 1.1 meters, 3.6 feet, in Crescent City and 0.61.5 meters, 2.5 feet, in San Francisco. Along the Chilean coast, waves of over 1.5 meters, 4 feet 11 inches were recorded. At some beaches, wave heights reached 2.5 meters, 8 feet 2 inches. In Boyaruca, Mall region, a 2.4 meter, 7 feet 10 inches rise in sea level was observed. At Coquimbo and Coliumo, these measurements were 1.2 meters, 3 feet 11 inches, and 1.0 meter, 3 feet 3 inches, respectively. Damage and casualties. At least 4 people were injured in Kamchatka, although none of their injuries were serious. Injuries were reported among people exiting buildings, including a hospital patient who jumped from a window. Damage to infrastructure, power outages and mobile phone service failures were reported in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. The facade of a kindergarten building partially collapsed, and cracks formed in the walls of several medical and social service buildings in the city. The ceiling covering of a terminal at Elizovo Airport collapsed, injuring a woman. In Sakhalin Oblast, ventilators and stovepipes of some buildings were partially destroyed. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov attributed the lack of fatalities and major damage in the region to robust building construction and the preparedness of locals. Emergency services noted an increase in calls from Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky complaining about high blood pressure, arrhythmia, and epilepsy. In the town of Severo-Kurilsk, located in the Kuril Islands, the earthquake toppled more than 90% of chimneys. The town's port was later inundated by the tsunami, with structures being swept away, including a fish processing plant following waves that reached 200 m, 660 feet, inland. Russian authorities said a state of emergency was declared on tsunami-hit islands. The town itself was originally located next to the port, but was largely destroyed by a tsunami in 1952, which prompted the officials to rebuild it on higher ground further inland, leaving only the port exposed. A state of emergency was subsequently declared in Severo-Kurilsky district and in Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. Around 2,700 people were evacuated. An electricity grid in Sakhalin was damaged by the earthquake, causing power outages. In Japan, 21 people were injured or suffered heat-related illnesses while evacuating, including 14 in Hokkaido and 1 in Miyazaki. In Kumano, Mie, a 58-year-old woman, died after she accidentally drove off a cliff while evacuating from the tsunami. Aftermath. Klyochevskaya Sopka, a volcano on the Kamchatka Peninsula, started erupting on the 30th of July shortly after the earthquake. Endnotes. According to the USGS, a large earthquake can trigger an eruption of a nearby volcano, but only if they are already poised to erupt.
Thank you for watching this AGNDD intelliReport, dear viewers. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell button to get notified during new uploads. And make sure to tune in next time. Stay safe and healthy. Cheers!